Is there a problem in our world? Some would say yes. However, it is not a new problem. It is a failure to perceive repetition. Cycles brought about by fear, shame, and guilt, because man has proven he will go to great lengths to avoid knowing himself. As a result, for a lack of knowing himself, man is easily made to fear other men, and as history has proven, he has collectively excelled in only one arena: murder. The average person might be able to name 100 significant contributors to humankind, but the number of those murdered by other humans possibly measures into hundreds of millions of deaths throughout recorded history. The masses of men are committed to violence against one another, self, and nature, both directly and indirectly. Does it have to be this way? Will this cycle endlessly repeat itself? I strongly feel that this happens because man does not know himself. He does not know himself, and in fact, it could even be said that he fears his unknown self. So he runs, and because he runs from himself, he becomes motivated by fear, loss, and scarcity. In such a state, life becomes less about living and more about survival. When recorded history is perceived as a whole, man is the missing link between apes and human beings, stated Konrad Lorenz. Man prides himself in believing that he is superior to the animals because of his capacity for rational thought. But is it just that? Only capacity? Where is the humanity in the course of history? Man kills not out of necessity, and rarely for actual defense, but rather strategically and preemptively. Since the dawn of time, men have gathered together plotting ways to take other men's land, possessions, and lives. What defines a man's life? I hope it is not the titles he achieves, nor the riches he accumulates. Is it found in some perceived sense of social status? Even the significance of that is lost over the generations. The All-State high school quarterback is lucky if he's vaguely remembered when he returns a decade later to watch the younger generation's football game, even though he probably remembers all the sweat, tears, pain, joy, and accolades he experienced on that field. The world was his in that moment, and as if he had never existed, the field has a new master, who will also pass to usher in the next. The same could be said for the luxury car, the trophy wife, the hot girlfriend, the house in the right neighborhood, and most other objects we men try to obtain. Over time, and usually more quickly than anticipated, it will all fade in value, beauty, and associated social status. Time leaves its mark on everything. A man's life, your life, is measured by the mark you leave on time. It all happens through influence. Some men can influence others through their artistic work, but the actual touch of the person himself fades as he becomes an icon instead of an individual. A person about whom quotes are attributed and books authored, but the personal touch is gone forever. The measure of your life will be made by those who know you and have been affected by your presence. You don't have to set out to be a hero in order to leave the world a hero. Your presence, should you choose, can have a profound effect upon every person you encounter. It is your choice. Recent scientific studies conducted by British and Canadian scientists have indicated that there is a significant possibility that our ancestors had far higher levels of testosterone than men do today, meaning that they were supposedly more violent and promiscuous. But put it into this perspective. It's likely that your father had more testosterone than you do, simply in light of the environmental factors that are affecting our generation. Your grandfather likely had more than him, as did his grandfather. And as you start to consider this, you might realize that times were indeed different. Violence and sex happened differently then. Class associations predetermined acceptable behavior involving violence and sex. And the consequences for not following social mores were at the time severe. Morality was determined largely by religion. And even in those eras that we refer to as repressed, men found that they could live by principle. And although I believe that repressed behavior is not ideal, I do believe that each of us have internal limitations that are loosely or firmly based upon certain principles, and these can be powerful allies. What if your personal greatness, your significance, rests within your capacity to control your urges? Not in a moralistic sense per se, but in a cognitive, behavioral sense, allowing you to make the best possible decisions in the moment. The petty tyrant. Your petty tyrant is directly linked to violence and sex. Zoom back out in your perspective. Big business tries to control you through your sex drive. Nearly everything is sexual. Sex sells, right? On the other hand, big government uses the other force, violence, manipulating your tribal instincts against their opponents. Not necessarily individuals that you have any personal quarrel with, but those whom the state deems dangerous to their motives. This sense of tribalism happens across various spectrums.
Yeah, right on.
And it is the very same one you experience when your team scores a goal. And then, to top it off, we've got religion trying to make us feel guilty, shameful, and fearful for our sexual acts, drives, and violence. Consider the current state of the world. Is there more war, more murder, more crimes against humanity, and more pollution in this century compared to the last? Is there a war upon consciousness? Is doublespeak occurring?
It depends upon what the meaning of the word is. Yeah.
Are more or less people using psychotropic pharmaceuticals to feel less? Are you even familiar with terms like 1984, Brave New World, Fahrenheit 451, ELF waves? Flicker rates, brainwave frequencies, soma. Do you live in a society with meaningful rituals? Do you have a concise, time-tested map for how to become a powerful, benevolent man? Or are you just making it up as you go along? I perceive that at the core of our individual personal problems, we find unaddressed problems facing the collective. One of the biggest challenges facing the West is a flexible and coherent sense of direction or purpose. This asks, where are you going and what are you leaving behind you? We are increasingly becoming fragmented beings, pulled in many directions, juggling different personas for various groups, wearing masks beneath none of which you are able to find what you might perceive to be your authentic self. Above all of us, or perhaps behind us, just over our left shoulder, as Carlos Castaneda stated, death constantly looms. This is our inevitable destiny that drives much of our behavior, but from behind the scenes, from the depths of our unconscious minds. For centuries, religion has answered with similar variations of impending eternal torture in the afterlife in exchange for obedience and some of your money in the present life. But is fear the only motivator to which men respond? How do you, as a man, use your inevitable destiny to push you forward into greatness? Men have been lost. In fact, we could be much closer to Barrie's concept of the lost boys in his novel Peter Pan. There is no trustworthy guide for leading a life that is purpose-driven, so we play at children's games. Grown men dedicated to sports, not realizing that they are mock battles in the real war of life. And life flashes before our eyes, and in the next moment, we are gone. What have we left behind us as a legacy? What have we created, both non-beneficial and beneficial for future generations? What do we tolerate or overlook in hope of getting ahead? A quick overview of history would show men behaving as boys. But why shouldn't we? After all, we have no ritual, no rite of passage, no specific transitional marker indicating when we have become men. And as a result, history bears the marks of men children, murdering, destroying, plundering. For a while, our ecosystem may have tolerated it, but life is a gentle web, and the natural systems in place soon may have no chance of recovering. And as a species, we humans are treading close to the unfathomable brink of ultimate self-destruction. Human beings, a species which has the potential to travel to the stars and beyond, may never rise above the mud puddle of avarice it has trapped itself in because of its refusal to confront fear, shame, and guilt. Men living with meaning is about choosing to act by design instead of react by default to your environment. There is going to be a tremendous amount of emphasis placed upon recognizing archetypal forms so that you can free yourself from their influences. The author of Jung and the Tarot, Sally Nichols, writes, "As we have seen, the behavior of those with little awareness of the archetypes is predetermined by unseen forces. It is almost as rigidly programmed as the instinctual behavior of the birds and bees, who always react to certain stimuli in a preordained way, so that mating, nest building, migration, and so forth are carried on in identical patterns throughout the generations. But when a human being has achieved some degree of self-awareness, he is able to make choices that are different from those of the flock, and to express himself in ways that are uniquely his own. Having contact with his own true self, he will no longer be prey to the chatter of other selves, inner and outer. What they are doing and saying will have less influence upon his life. He will be able to examine current social customs and ideas and adopt them or not as he chooses. He will be free to act in ways that fulfill his deepest needs and express his truest self. It is important to note here that as a person gains the independence to be a nonconformist, he also gains the self-assurance to be a conformist. As Jung often stressed, an individuated person is not the same as someone who is individualistic. He is not driven to conform to custom, but he is equally not driven to defy it. He does not try to set himself apart from his peers by affecting peculiar dress or exhibiting outlandish behavior. On the contrary, because he so truly experiences himself as a unique expression of the Godhead, he is under no compulsion to prove it. When we meet such a person, he is usually indistinguishable at first glance from others in the group. His overt behavior and dress may be in no way remarkable. He may be actively engaged in conversation, or he may be relatively quiet, but almost instantly, some indefinable quality in his way of being may attract us to him. It is as if everything about him, his clothes, his gestures, his way of sitting or standing, belongs to him. Nothing about him is superimposed. Everything he says or does appears to arise from his deepest center, so that even his most ordinary remark shines forth with new meaning. If he is silent, his silence too seems to belong. It is a comfortable silence both for him and for us. Often such a person in silence will seem more present and active than those who are participating in more overt ways, because he is in contact with his deepest self. Our deep self responds, so that sitting in silence with this kind of human being can open up new vistas of awareness. Being at home with himself, he is instantly at home with us, and we with him. We feel as though we've known him forever. The communication between us is so open and easy that we understand him, and yet he puzzles us. On one hand, he is the most unusual person we have ever met, and on the other, he is just like us. He is a paradox. This is my highest vision for men living with meaning. Men who change the face of the earth and leave an echo in time of their presence, shaking the world with a distinct contrast with what has existed. Men who bring healing, men who bring progress, men who champion the natural rights of every individual's self-actualization above those of any organization. To ensure the future of humanity has the greatest chances for autonomy and freedom, the individual must come first. The individual must know his or herself, and the individual is required to become his own master. Otherwise, he'll become enslaved to the machinations of the state, technology, religion, or some form of technocratic control. History repeats itself, and time after time, man willingly enslaves himself. Will it be different with our generation? Only if men, such as you and I, choose to be torchbearers into the future, bringing old teachings, timeless traditions, and a method for integrating this information. Only then does the collective of humanity stand an equal chance for freedom and autonomy.
We've been fighting a long time. We are outnumbered by machines. Humans have a strength that cannot be measured. If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
Here's an overview of what will be covered over the course of the next 10 months. Each module is designed to take 30 days, and new content will be made available every few days so that you can have sufficient time to review the materials. It is up to you to decide how much time you'll invest in the assignments. So keep in mind, you'll get out of this what you put into it. And definitely much more than just that, is my opinion. In Module 1, we'll cover the concept of individuation, how this applies to the course your life follows, why there is a massive amount of pressure for society to trend towards collectivism, and powerful methods to begin developing your future vision. Module 2 addresses perception and paradigm. You will learn how your subjective reality influences your emotions, mindset, attitudes, and behaviors. In many instances, we're not reacting to an objective reality, but to our perceptions of reality, and we tend to not perceive things as they are, but as we are. In this module, you will awaken the latent abilities you have for beginning to perceive the matrix processing all about you. The third module is about reclaiming your personal history, knowing your history and freeing yourself from it. Your past is not your future if you are brave enough to confront it. I feel that every module is extremely important, but this one is the pivotal point. Until we address individuation and paradigm, the content in modules 1 and 2, we're not using the same language. And in Module 3, I'll share with you the techniques that I use in life coaching sessions so that you can understand how to do them on your own. And by the end of the module, you'll have integrated these techniques into your unconscious mind so that they happen effortlessly and nearly instantaneously. This is about placing you in control of how you choose to allow your experiences to disempower or empower you. Module 4 focuses upon defining your identity. For most people, their identities are assumed instead of designed. You are who you are because you've accepted this role up until this point in your life. Who you will become is up to you to decide. And if you do not decide, then others will certainly decide for you. As you discover the tools necessary to shape your identity, you'll find that there is a dramatic shuffling effect as behaviors, priorities, values, interests, and mindsets shift to become congruent with this evolving you as you choose to define yourself, not based upon your past, but upon your future and the sort of man it demands of you. The fifth module brings men even deeper within themselves to confront the individual and collective sources of who we once were. As men, we evolve out of the being of woman. Our first experience in life is the participation mystique, the mystical participation, in which you, the infant, cannot distinguish between self and mother, setting the entire precedence for an individual experience of the feminine. This may be one of the rawest, most confrontational modules, as you will actively investigate a comprehensive spectrum of your experiences with women, beginning with your mother. I feel that one reason male-female relationships have been trending disastrously is because, for our part of the equation, we men have not done our individual healing work regarding the feminine. So we drag our pasts, beginning with our unresolved mother issues, into each relationship. And often these are relationships with women who have not healed their wounds from the masculine. And if we had discernment, we would probably not have chosen such partners to begin with. If you value successful relationships, both platonic and intimate with women, then this work must be completed. Perhaps the next module isn't any less raw, because in the sixth module, we dig into our father issues, examining the hurt done to us by men and other boys in our lives, beginning with dad. It is my perspective that often the games we play, the achievements we strive for, the drive that moves us, or the apathy that stills us stems from the possibility that parts of us are still trying to get daddy's approval prove that we're just as good as him, if not better, or that we don't need him. Your father may have been the punisher, the rewarder, the breadwinner, the overachiever, the underachiever, the failure, the drunk, the religious man. Whatever it was, he was trying to find his place in life, or running from the call to live life. He may be dead. You may have never known him. He might be estranged, or he could be your best friend. Whatever the circumstances, your ability to move forward in your life pivots around your ability to identify the father games you've been playing. Understanding how these play out in your relationships with other men and will potentially affect how you interact with your own son or younger men someday. The 7th module brings us face to face with fear. Fear of failure, fear of actually getting what you want, the fear of uncertainty, ultimately facing the certainty of your mortality. I was once told that a man experiences fear and acts according to his will, despite the fear. A boy hides from his fear, hoping that he will escape it somehow, and runs until he becomes a man. You'll examine your fears, know them intimately, and the running must stop if you're to bring your gift to the world. In the 8th module, we examine permission. For many men, it seems as though we are constantly at war with ourselves, our minds, our bodies, our goals, other people, the world, the universe. This module addresses energy management, body awareness, self-acceptance, mindfulness, awakening your body, and removing internal resistance. It also brings the shadow elements you had previously uncovered in other modules to the foreground, establishing a means for you to integrate these into your being as you're becoming an empowered man who fully embodies his vehicle for this lifetime. Module 9 focuses upon the integration of the previous modules. This becomes learning in action as you discover for yourself how you're going to intertwine critical thinking, creative living, and autonomy into your future. This will become your platform for life design as you discover, evolve, and grow your primary life purpose. Module 9 will illustrate how to move beyond basic goal setting, transcend social limitations about what you believe is possible for you to achieve. And this module will help you to identify what you need to develop yourself as what might be considered a modern-day Renaissance man. The final module, Module 10, is about you championing a cause. For some, this might be your vocation. For others, it might be an avocation. It could be a blend of each, but whatever it is, it becomes your territory. This is your domain, your space for mastery. Everything you've experienced, healed from, and integrated has prepared you for this cause. You living this is you living with meaning. From this place, you find your freedom and your bliss in an ever-expansive manner. As the author Alan Moore states, when you are doing the will of your true self, you are inevitably doing the will of the universe. Ultimately, there will be change. The Ouroboros, the serpent consuming its own tail, is symbolic testimony that paradoxically, change is constant. Your life, my life, the life of every individual is buffeted by winds of chaos, uncertainty, and change. You can never control those elements, but you can learn to control yourself. In life, our experiences can be different, but usually we don't make significant changes because we don't know what to change, why to change, how to begin changing, or even worse yet, what might happen if we actually do change. Sometimes that uncertainty alone is enough to keep us in stasis. The author James Prochaska presents 5 stages of change. First, pre-contemplation. It's the realm of never. Second, contemplation. Never becomes someday. Third, preparation. Someday becomes soon. Fourth, action. Soon is now. And perhaps the most difficult stage, fifth, maintenance. Now becomes forever. If you choose to proactively change, it requires triangulation, plotting a course in a similar manner as ancient mariners. First, you need an objective as possible self-assessment. Secondly, you must identify your ideal experiences should you change. And thirdly, you're going to have to develop the physical, monetary, social, emotional, and mental resources that correspond with your ideal experiences. If you don't want much, then there isn't a lot to do. But if you have lofty goals, then there is plenty to develop. Realize that much of this change in your self-perspective, to encompass your lofty ideal, considering yourself as an employee, a student, a retiree, or something else that's easily categorizable, just isn't going to do anymore. As you expand toward your primary life purpose, it is inclusive, drawing together all of the interests and possibilities that you may have thought you had to let go of as you matured. That is the traditional trend in life, to find yourself becoming very specialized in one niche. In this program, you're going to find that your interests, your desires, and your passions move you the opposite direction. As a generalist, after all, what is a Renaissance man? Above those 5 stages of change looms the archetypal types of change. There may be other variations possible, but I decided upon these 3 major categories of change based upon the models that I'm using within Men Living with Meaning. First, there is mythic change, the hero's journey, the monomyth. We find ourselves forced into a cause-based action. We appreciate this story as it plays out in Star Wars, Indiana Jones, The Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, The Bourne Identity, etc. But most of us do not live this way. And if we do face this sort of calling, it's usually very harrowing and nerve-wracking, like being kidnapped in a foreign country and trying to figure out where to go from there and how to stay alive. The second category of change is spiritual change. The Zen ox herding metaphor. We sense something is lacking and venture into the realms of the qualitative unknown. And this is where people get stuck in organizations like religions and cults. And there's a very slim margin distinguishing one from the other, in my opinion. Stuck with other seekers who need permission from a hierarchy and rules to follow. And these people are usually kept from authentic spiritual development because that would free them from the control mechanisms of the organization. And lastly, we find material change. Being externally motivated by various drives: consumerism, sex drive, social status, fun, luxury, health. These drivers unconsciously motivate most people because we're unaware of the core impacts they're having upon our decision-making strategies. At the material level of change, we associate material things with emotional states, none of which seem to last for very long. And for this reason, there's always a new shiny emotional state to purchase, disguised in the form of a car, clothes, a house, golf clubs, maybe even a girlfriend. This category of change tries to emulate the spiritual and mystic change, and it's becoming the prominent religion of our era, worshiping at the altar of rampant consumerism. In Western culture, this ruling paradigm is often referred to as bettering oneself. Well, at least going through the motions of bettering yourself so that you can buy more stuff. I have a question for you. When did you become a man? How did you know that you were a man? Did someone else refer to you as a man? Did someone call you a boy or a child and you stated that you were a man? Did you get laid? Did you shave for the first time? Was it something else like being able to vote or buy a beer? In likelihood, it probably wasn't any one of these things, but more so all of them together, and many more experiences, including your age and perceived responsibilities like a job or perhaps becoming a father. I believe that we've lost a meaningful rite of passage, a transitory period marking the journey from boyhood into manhood, in which the expectations change, the level of personal responsibility changes. On any given day, I can review the news and I perceive that we live in a world in which men boys are actively in control. The lack of principles, personal control, foresight, accountability, and ecology is staggering and continues to trend negatively. Less than a fraction of a percent of the men on this planet are in control of this, while the rest of us sit idly by, allowing it, distracted by the game on television, making excuses for our team or our political party, trying to get laid, get a promotion, or at least just do barely enough to not get fired. And we, perhaps not you, but we, the collective of men, are under attack and we do not seem to realize it. We stuff our obese faces with genetically modified fast food, then complain that we're overweight and our dicks don't work, and then we have our prescription pills to make us happy, hard, and diabetes proof, and we repeat it all over again. What we seem to be chasing are emotional states, something significant, something meaningful, but the maps that we have, they're either outdated, overly mystical, completely irrelevant, or too challenging. The advice that you get from your father, if you have a relationship with your father, is probably watered down and not very applicable. So much has changed in the past 20 to 30 years, or even 40 to 50 years. And perhaps your grandfather might have more relevant advice because he was at least part of a generation that grew up with different principles. And there's a difference between principles, values, and morality that we'll examine in Men Living with Meaning. I'm sharing with you my personal journey of self-discovery. Men Living with Meaning is what I've been pursuing for over a decade. I don't claim to have all the answers. I don't claim to be perfect. What I do claim is to have some pretty damn good questions that I believe can guide you to your own answers. What is right for you could be different from what is right for someone else or for me. But the value is in the questions, and the questions are worth asking. So I'm still on my own personal development journey, and it's going to continue until the day I die. It's an ongoing process that at this point I've been fortunate enough to make it an intense decade of little else but personal work. And I believe that I can save you a decade of your life or more. There are a lot of things that I've been able to condense and distill in order to save you time. The time it took for me to go and read massive amounts of literature, to listen to hundreds, if not thousands of hours of interviews and audios, to watch countless videos, and go to who knows how many seminars and training events. And from all of these experiences, and they're going to continue to grow, I've distilled the core concepts, the best insights I've had to date, and the most powerful techniques into a 10-month process that is going to evolve over time. And this is one that, as far as I know, no one else has created in this way. Is men living with meaning for you? I don't know. You've been invited. Perhaps it was by me. Perhaps it was by someone else who perceives something unique about you. Only time will tell, and this experience is not for every man. In fact, this is probably what most men are running from, and that's okay. The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation, and for this reason, the mass of men, the mass of humanity, is controlled by a few. If you want to do something significant with your life, whether you're an artist, an entrepreneur, a student, a visionary, if you want to invest your time in a life well lived, then we want you.